Hello, in this module we're going to talk about the care of your brand new practice chanter. If you're fairly new to piping and to learning to play pipes, the practice chanter is the fundamental instrument that you'll be using for a lot of what you do. So it's well to care for it. If you care for it well, a practice chanter should last you for your lifetime. And if you care for the parts of it that sometimes need replacing, they should last a long time as well. First thing to do is to identify the parts and give them names. This is my practice chanter. I'll take it apart. Be careful when you take them apart. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. This is the top section. The reed, which has a binding on the bottom and sits into the reed seat, needs to be firmly planted in there. And the chanter bottom. Things you need to do to care for your chanter first up. Make sure you don't do things with it that are obviously not good for it, especially if it's made of blackwood. They're either usually made of blackwood or made of some form of plastic material. Either is totally effective for the purpose, so it's not that important which you choose. I think a lot of people like blackwood just because of the feel of it under their fingers, but it doesn't really make much difference for your learning process which you're using. So don't leave it in a hot car all day. Don't leave it soaking with water. Just common sense things. It's better if you don't drop it. I had the experience of dropping a wooden chanter many years ago and it split. The weakest point of the chanter is around here, and that's where I actually split mine many years ago. It's where this hole is at the back is a very, very fragile spot. If you leave it on a table, make sure you lay it down. Some modern chanters and older chanters have a ring of material at the base called the sole, and you can actually make it stand up. Not a very wise move though. The other thing you need to be very careful of is not to damage the tips of the reed that's inside. The corners are very pointed, they're very fragile, they're very thin. So when you're doing anything with a practice chanter, make sure that you're very careful not to damage those tips. And that's particularly true when you take your practice chanter apart, and you'll need to do that. We'll talk about that in a moment, or put it back together. So the first thing in assembling it is to put the reed firmly into the seat without really forcing it, and then to put the top on carefully. Make sure that you're well aligned as you put it in there, so that you don't tilt the top sideways and potentially chip or damage the corner of the reeds. Reeds can be plastic or they can be made of cane. I think most people use plastic pipe chanter reeds and practice chanter reeds these days, not pipe chanter reeds so much. But either is okay. One of the things that you'll need to do regularly in looking after your practice chanter is keep it dry. While you're playing, it may start to make burbling noises, or you may actually notice water coming out of some of the holes. So you need to dry it. There's a fairly simple process to dry out the practice chanter or the reed when you're in middle of a practice session. And I'll show you what I would do. If I felt that my reed was getting wet, I would take it apart carefully. Notice that I've put my hands together here to take it apart. You should not reach to the bottom of the chanter and turn it that way with your hands a long distance apart. It does give you extra leverage, but there's a good chance with some chanters, particularly wooden ones, you're likely to split the chanter. I have seen bagpipe chanters split by doing that several times since I've been playing. It's better to get the habit now to basically put your knuckles together like that and twist it as you take it apart. When it gives that last little bit, then be very slow and careful taking it apart. So take the three pieces apart as the first step. Then to dry it, step number 1, blow backwards through the top. You may have seen a little bit of spray come out there. Step number 2 for me would be to take the reed and blow through the bottom of it so that the air goes backwards through the reed. When you do that, you may find a few beads of moisture at the top. Just wipe them off. Perhaps grab a tissue and wipe them off. Then we look at the bottom section. There's 2 steps here. First thing is put a blast of air into the reed seat. Now do that with your lips away from the reed seat, a centimetre or so that you can actually form a jet of air into it. The second thing is then to blow through the hole at the back. The reason you particularly focus on that one is because when you're playing the practice chanter, it's normally on its side at a bit of an angle like that, and any moisture is going to dribble down the back of it and into that top hole that's at the back. So you want to dry that out and then reassemble carefully as we showed before. It's best to dry your practice chanter out after a period of practice. I'm a believer in drying everything out that you can, including a little bit of drying out of the binding that holds the chanter together at the joint, but not leaving the chanter out to dry for hours. I'd rather it were reassembled after it's had a basic drying, and I think that contributes to the life of the chanter. If you look after your chanter well, as I said earlier, it'll last a long, long time. If you look after your reeds well, don't damage them, they'll also last a long, long time. This chanter reed I have here has been in my practice chanter for over 10 years. It's not so much the cost of a practice chanter reed that matters, it's the investment in making it work well. Sometimes you need to spend a bit of time on it. You don't want to lose that time value. So take the right steps. Don't do silly things with it. Think about looking after it. Keep it dry within reason, but not totally dried out, and it'll last you a long time and provide lots of pleasure. Thank you.